All right, let's jump right into it. So, Andreas, you brought up this week about the retro topic, maybe adding a synchronous meeting during the milestone to talk about retro topics rather than keeping it asynchronous the way we are. Or do you want to verbalize your comment suggestion?
Yeah, I was realizing that most of the time I was pretty late to putting comments on the retrospective issue. And it led me to realize that I think it's partly because I feel that we're not making a lot of use of the retrospective anyways for our group so far. And I just thought back to previous experiences with retrospectives, and we typically had those quite targeted to the group, and then sort of taking the results and putting that more in the engineering-wide perspective, retrospective. I was wondering what do you think about that, or if you feel similar in that area, and if we could have maybe a call, or I don't know if it has to be a call, but could be useful to try maybe 1 week before the public retro happening. Is that something you find useful, or should we do the async, or any thoughts on that?
Do you have any thoughts on that?
I personally think that it's pretty great if we could do that. It will be useful.
Yeah, I agree that I would like to do that as well.
Okay.
Perhaps in an effort not to increase the meeting time per week, we could do it on the office hours call.
Yep, for sure. Okay. Actually, that was my suggestion. I like the idea of synchronous retros too. I didn't want to force it on anybody. So my suggestion was maybe the first one after the end of the milestone. And okay.
Yep, and that way we have everything fresh in our memory, and we don't, because yeah, I agree with Andreas, we end up rushing to fill in the issue 2 days before it ends.
We're not the only team that does it, trust me. The memory team did the same thing the last couple retros. So, and the other thing is the retro bot didn't work this month for some reason for memory and database team. It didn't ping everybody when the milestone closed to remind everyone to enter info into the retro. That being said, I mean, the 13.2 retro has been open for a little while, right? And I used to be okay at entering things as they came up. I haven't done it for a while. So it's always something we can add in during the month of the milestone. Like, hey, this was a really cool thing. You just put a note in there. But I like the idea of the synchronous one, and it'll actually help me to transfer themes over to the engineering-wide one. So I'll take a look at my calendar and figure out how to time that so that it happens right after the end of the milestone, and make sure that we use office hours. And speaking of office hours, these have kind of turned into like team meetings instead of being like just casual most of the time, which I'm getting a thumbs up from Giannis at least, and not getting people shaking their head from everybody else. So in the interest of reducing the number of meetings, do y'all want to get rid of the Monday meeting and just assume that we'll do team meetings during these office hours? I see Giannis nodding. I see Pat looking off thoughtfully.
I personally love those meetings. I think that Tuesday and Thursday are great times to meet up, and we have plenty of time to discuss.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe we can, just thinking we could make sure that the sort of the mandatory part, or the more important part of the team meeting, maybe limited to 30 minutes or so, that we have a time box on that, and then afterwards we can maybe
socialize.
There's still topics, socialize or whatever.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep. So I'm hearing then go ahead and cancel Monday, but make sure that we time box if the mandatory parts of it, so that we still have time to just socialize afterwards. All right.
That's good.
Okay. I'll just do that now. If not, I don't have my calendar open. I'll cancel it later.
Can I ask something about the scaling working group, or how we call it right now?
It's called the multi-large working group now.
Yeah. So the scaling working group. Do we want to participate there, or do we need to? Not need to. Is there a need for us to be there, or what do you think?
No. Did anybody watch yesterday's meeting or attend?
Yeah.
Okay. So you have an idea of the direction. I passively watched it when I came back in the afternoon. I didn't completely consume it, but it seemed like the theme of that was like the initial goals are, how do we quickly set up an environment, a targeted large environment. I think the minimum boundary was 1,000 users, right? Using an entirely Kubernetes and Helm setup, I think was the initial goal. So feel free to attend, but I don't think we are like direct stakeholders in this. I think we'd be more observers. I don't think there's going to be a lot of work needed from us until we are specifically called out like, hey, we need these changes to better support the goals of this working group. So I have gotten entirely out. I'm not the DRI or the facilitator anymore. So I'm curious about the goals of the working group, and I will probably attend as much as I can as a member, but we're no longer required.
So I attended yesterday, and I can give the update. The main goal is now to focus on rolling GitLab.com onto Kubernetes is the initial goal.
Okay.
Do we have plans to put the database on Kubernetes as well?
I don't think so.
Okay, good.
Maybe in 2 years, but not in 2 months.
Okay.
And it's scaling up to 1 million users, or is it? Okay.
The goal is to be able to replicate multiple GitLab.coms without linearly increasing the number of support staff that we need to run them. So that is the main goal. And we want to do that by deploying onto Kubernetes and leverage automation through an operator, which can automate more of the tasks of, rebalancing Gitly and other kind of operational tasks that can be run by hand. So that's the goal. And for those multiple GitLab.com instances, the idea is that we should have the ability to get them up to 1 million users. So big ones like GitLab.eu, GitLab.cn, things like that. So not like little 5,000 user instances. So that's the goal, but the goal also, of course, is to make sure that anything we do is also available to self-managed. And so as we mature our operator, customers can take advantage of it, and it will also reduce the operational burden on customers as well. So that's the thing, and the short-term goal is that we have to be able to get the application on the GitLab.com. And so there's currently challenges in doing so.
Thanks, Josh. And
Alvaro is experimenting with Helm charts for Postgres, but this is for far in the future.
Alvaro sounds like Ingress is making an operator for Postgres, but I have not heard of any short-term plan to use said operator for Postgres. I know Zalando also has one, like I think it's like an e-commerce shop, pretty big, and they have a pretty famous operator, but I don't think there's any intent to have us be like bleeding edge in the database side of things. If it happens, I'll let you all know so you can comment on the issues.
So thanks for asking that, Giannis. And in parallel, there were questions about, since we're not doing sharding, what are we doing to ensure that the database doesn't just explode, right? We still have that rolling 12-month window. And the things I kept pointing to were the reduced total size and growth of GitLab.com Postgres database. So we have that epic out there, and we can talk to Josh now about enabling the CI retention strategy. that's something I was supposed to follow up on last week, and I don't have. Andreas, do you have that issue available? I couldn't find it when I was looking on Friday, and I may not have put a lot of effort into it knowing I was going into PTO.
There's 2 issues linked on the Epic. One is for infrastructure. The other is for the code base, I think. Is that what you mean?
There was an issue or a conversation about the fact that we already have a retention strategy available for CI builds, and we just need to turn it on. But we needed to talk to product about it. Do you remember that thread or that conversation?
I do, but I don't know what the issue is. Let me find out.
Okay. So
it's on the infrastructure issue. I think that one has most of that. Yeah.
Okay, I'll find it later and send it to you, Josh, and we can talk about it. But apparently there's some functionality available, but there's some impact or some implication that we need product feedback on. So
yeah, I think like some buttons stop working and things like that, which is good because the data's gone. And so I think that my main thing is I want the CI team to own the decision of where to like impact their user experience. So I shouldn't be negatively impacting, like that should be a decision by them.
All right, I will find it and send it to you, and then you can send it to the CI product manager.
Yep, I think I've already pinged them if I recall correctly, but.
Okay. And then, sorry, go ahead.
In terms of things we're doing so the database doesn't explode, I think what we should do after finishing the audit events migration helpers for partitioning is basically coming up with a plan and suggestions which tables and or features will benefit from partitioning. So there's a couple of big tables that we should tackle probably. Some have issues with the primary keys, so that might be motivation tackling them. Sort of maybe we can compile a similar epic or list of things that we want to motivate for that. And again, I think it would be best if the backend team owning that feature was considering that or making that decision at least. We can support them.
Is that going to come from the workload analysis issue that you have that is unassigned at the moment?
Maybe yes. I think maybe some of that comes from that. I think we should still have a comprehensive review of big tables and a couple of things that where we think partitioning helps. And we don't have an issue for that yet.
Okay.
That was actually the other thing I wanted to mention, the workload analysis. So yeah, what comes out of that is also what we should do to not let the database explode.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean that'll be our roadmap for the next several months, right? What can we do to continue to fine tune our database so that we are managing growth and we don't hit another wall? There was a good analysis on where we can vertically scale in one of the issues and the impact of switching different types of machines on GCP and whether we can, because while we can still vertically scale, there's some region issues where some of these machines are not available. So it gets complicated pretty quickly if we do need to get more CPU, I think was the main issue. And I need to find that analysis. I can link back here. But we have room. It's not simple. So we should continue to figure out where we can curtail the growth of the database and maybe even cut it back in some places. And also, how do we enable other teams to start implementing those partitioning strategies? So, what is this, LinkedIn? Oh, yeah.
I just wanted to mention that don't know if you follow that conversation with the Postgres AI database labs tool. We have the ability to use to port forward Postgres basically to your local machine and directly access the production clone. So it might be tempting to sort of, well, I can use my development environment and hook that up to the production database. It's actually very easy to do that. And we might want to make a call on whether or not that is acceptable, or what can you do with that port forwarding solution, and what is something that you shouldn't be doing. Some concerns Casimir raised was, well, you're booting up the development environment on production data. Does that send any emails, or where does the production data land? What do we do? What do we need to do to sort of make that a safe environment? Because it's ultimately, I think it's beneficial having that ability, because you can test migrations easily. And it's really convenient. You just use your local development environment, you hook it up to the production clone, and well, you run migrations on top of that. That's great. But at the same time, it has some security implications. So should we be making a call on whether or not that is acceptable at this point in time before I think it's still the access request is still pending on that one for everybody to use that feature.
Yeah. Okay. I will put it on my list of things to review today. All right. Yeah, and in general, I need to send out a request for feedback on how much value this has given folks that actually are using it right now. Because we are, a month and a half into the evaluation, and it seems like some people haven't even been able to hook up to it yet. So there's some delays. I know there's some benefits to it, but getting periodic feedback was one of the goals of this. So I will reach out to folks and see what they think.
Yeah, unfortunately, the access request is still pending, so we're still basically waiting for SSH keys to get installed on that box, which is kind of the greatest feature from that product in that sense, because I'm really getting used to using that. You just, on the console, you create a new clone using the CLI tool, and you set up port forwarding, and you're good to go, and you have a really safe environment to try some partitioning, whatever. You can just do changes on a pSQL console. It's really great. And so far, most of the people haven't been able to use that.
Yeah.
And if you have the CLI, I don't think that you need anything else, because it's faster. You can do whatever you want. You don't need a job bot or whatever. But I think that Nick also has upgraded some of the servers, and the web UI also is faster and it's more responsive. So it also works pretty nice. It's pretty nicely.
Has anybody used session sharing yet? Okay. I think that one will be valuable later on. There's an issue I linked below. It's going to be called out in the retro later today. Clement brought it up about improving database review process and sharing of new requirements. There was some feedback that folks felt like the requirements for doing a database review were changing, and that we need to better communicate and also help to explain the explains. And I think that's where session sharing could come in, and helping folks out that don't necessarily understand how the plan is explained. And we need to think about how we can help improve communication around the review process, especially if something changes. And I don't have any examples on what was changed. It's a fairly sparse issue, but it was brought up during the last retro. We do have a few things that we've done that are related to helping improve that process, but we have this issue. If we can't get to it in this milestone, we can move it to the next one and come up with some ideas on how to make it easier for folks on their database review process.
But I have also consolidated our guides in a new page under the guides.
Yep.
And I have made a simple update for now. And I want to also make a new update that has a better summary. So at least it will help new authors. It will help drive new authors on what they are going to do. Like, okay, I have an MR. What are the links? So now we have I don't remember, guides/database, and they can go there, and they have a summary on top, and at least they know where to click. And
is it this one, Giannis?
Let me check. Let me see.
I don't know why this isn't opening. Must have
Yeah,
that.
so this is for reviewers, and also have made a simple update on the top page. So if you go there from the link, so let me find the link. So now we have, yeah, let me share in this chat. So also now we have this page, which is the top page, the entry page for anything regarding the database guides. And I'm going to move more things there. And there is on the left pane also the top things to check, and also a very quick intro on the top. At least this is an entry point, and we are going to iterate on that and add more things.
Now, is
But
this
at least,
a new edition, or is this you added more information to it?
so this was hidden under the other guides. So now there is a separate page that's called database guides that brings everything on top. And I added a small paragraph on top so that you know that you have to go to the database review guidelines and you have to check them if you have them. It's nothing new. It's nothing. It's not rocket science, but at least I have it up there. And we now have this page, and we have on the left those links with the 5 most top things to click. Small iterations. Maybe it will help people at least. And also we have this guide for new reviewers.
But is that sort of mostly, should we point people to documentation better? Or it sounded a bit like if something changes, how do I notice that? And that could also improve on that end.
Yeah, it's both, right? There was some confusion, lack of knowledge about where the existing documentation was, and also how do we better broadcast changes when they come up, and how do we help with explaining? It's a pretty broad question, and I think it started with the push to get more database reviewers. So helping to spread the knowledge, helping to understand, helping to support those that are jumping into being a database reviewer. So all of this helps and all of this applies, and I'm going to talk about it in the retro today. So thanks for that extra link, Giannis. That will help quite a bit actually. And hopefully we'll get some more feedback that folks can say, actually, I need some more information on this tracking issue here.
And also, if we have this landing page now, we may add a new things to check there. So we may have, okay, it will be manual updates, but maybe when we make changes, we have the top new things there in this page for people to check. I don't know.
Yep.
Other than broadcasting to development and whatever other channels we are broadcasting.
Regarding the query plans and understanding that better, maybe something that we could advertise, maybe also today, is the database office hours call, the bi-weekly one. So that was always sort of meant to be a point of contact where you can sort of bring your complicated queries and get some explanations if needed. Maybe that's a chance for everybody to jump on that call and ask questions around that.
Yeah, for sure. So I have added links there for the new database reviewers, and maybe we can move those things also in for everyone. And also have added for the new database reviewers some additional articles on explain and especially some articles from the PSZ that has all those explain more in depth discussions.
And I've added another bullet point for database office hours. Thanks for the suggestion, Andreas. So I have a long list of things we can talk about helping folks understand database reviews and where to get information. So that's awesome. And I will add a lot of that back into the issue too for folks that are watching that tracking issue. So thanks. All right. On to goals from last week. Pat, you're up first.
Yeah, the post-migration helper. So testing that there sort of highlighted that the query doesn't perform that well. So I created a new MR, made some changes to the background migration. That works so we can track that a little better, which then hopefully that will prevent us from having to do query the table in the same way. So that MR I'm going to try to get So it kind of pushed out the timeline for that a little bit, but I think it's a change that needs to be made. And for the conflict-free schema helper, that one I pushed a fix for. I just have to go back and get it reviewed again so that we can reschedule the deployment for that.
Okay.
And the work on the background migration, that's great for the partitioning migration, and maybe sometime down the road, it's probably also going to be very useful for other background migrations to have that. So it's a good direction.
All right. Andreas, you're up.
Yeah, that one is nearly finished, except that I'm still fighting with specs blowing up. So we're basically, it was a bit more work than I expected. We're basically introducing a new concept where we create tables and partitions during runtime, which basically leads to a couple of touch points where you have to check that. So you want to have a cron job and initialize it, and you also want to care about that for the specs. And the last point is what I'm still working on. I hope I get it done today, and then I'll send it for review.
Today's over for you, isn't it?
I'm working late today. Started late.
Got it. Giannis.
Yeah, the fix has been merged and will be backported, and also there is a similar issue. Somebody else was working on. I reviewed and helped them with a similar issue with missing routes. So everything is good there. And then I worked on. We have a server set up. We generated a data set, 240 million records, audit events, and we run the partition migration using all the tools by Patrick and Andreas. And I can say that everything seems to work. We had some issues with the background jobs not running, but that was most probably a setup issue of our server. The good news is that the background migration ran for a 240 million events dataset. The partitions were created, the triggers work, all the data went to the proper partitions, and I have run some benchmarks, and we can see that the partition data set, at least everything without any other optimizations, all the query times for queries that have date filters on them go down significantly. Some queries go up, but at least everything is stable. So we see stable query times between at around 500 milliseconds up to 2 seconds, when most of those queries were timing out and are timing out right now in production. So I think that this is a success, and this shows that without doing anything else, the partition strategy works and the queries work.
Awesome. Thanks. All right, so for this week, yeah, Andreas, thanks for calling that out. Josh, do you know who we should reach out to for the UI, UX changes needed for in conjunction with partitioning? So this is all about the date picker.
Yeah, Matt Gonzalez.
Okay.
We pinged him in at one of the issues already, I believe, and he was like, the response was kind of like, yeah, sure, we'll do that. And so I think there's kind of might be just waiting for us to let them know when they should to do that. But somewhere in there is a discussion in one of those issues around the date picker, and that they're on board with doing it.
Okay. I will follow up.
I can try and find it, but
okay. Got it. So we had a couple of unassigned issues. It looks like Andreas is suggesting we push to later, 13.3.
Unless somebody has already started on them, but I think what we should get out is the partitioning and focus on that.
Yep.
Before we start those new topics.
Okay. Pat or Giannis, either of you jumped into either of these issues? Okay. And Giannis is going to be gone at the end of this milestone, so I'll just move these out. All right. And we already talked about the database review, sharing new requirements. Does anybody feel like anything is likely to slip this milestone? And we still have a week. Well, we still have 2 weeks basically in the milestone.
Yeah, I think it's probably pretty unlikely that the query performance select one would be done. You know, it's going to be wrapped by the end of this milestone just because partitioning, there's still, I have a few other MRs already still in progress, so.
Okay, we'll keep an eye on it.
Did you find us?
Go ahead, Andres.
Did you find a solution for the select one issue?
Yeah, I haven't really looked into it too much. You know, there was this suggestion in the issue to just do like a caching solution. I haven't spent too much time on it.
No, that's fine.
All right, what do we want to accomplish this week, Andreas? Do we want to break it down by person, or do we just want to set like team goals here?
I would like a team goal, to be honest. I think
Okay.
that'd be good.
All right, what do we want to get out in the next week?
Do we think it's feasible to submit the partitioning migration this week? And what do we need for that? The partition management is one of those things. The background migration, tracking that better. And we should be confident that we're not breaking things. Is anything else missing?
All right, can you list those again?
Partition management.
Break.
That's my pending MR. Background migration tracking. That's what Pat suggested and is working on. And not breaking anything is.
Yeah, we need the
benchmarking
tracking if we are going to use that, because we need to have this before we release the migration. And if we can, just check together the results from the GCP server to make sure that I did not miss anything. And maybe then rerun the partition with the background migration tracking on our GCP server.
Say that again, Jonas. Run the migration with background tracking. Yeah,
so there is the MR that Pat is working on. So if we are going to use it, we need it before we deploy the data migration. So after we have this merged, let's run again the background, the migration on our GCP server to make sure that everything works correctly. And because we have it all on our own, we can run it very quickly. So I ran the background migrations in 1 hour because I had them just doing 10 times more loads.
For the benchmarking, do we have results for the insert performance difference already with the trigger?
No, I never got to that. I did create a merge request in the partitioning tools project with that SQL. So maybe Giannis, if you have a time today when you're doing other benchmarking and you want to run that.
Yeah, assign it to me, and we have the data set now, so we have all those partitions, so we can use that to test.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I'll ping you.
All right.
So speaking of goals, is that feasible to do this week, or do we expect that to take longer? And I'm not sure.
I think it's possible. I don't know if it's likely necessarily, but I think it's good to strive for that at least.
Yeah, sounds good.
I think that everything will depend also on how fast we are going to merge the background migration tracking by path. So maybe we should check it and then move it forward to be reviewed and merged, and then we can test. Do you agree?
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah.
I was just looking through the handbook about setting audacious goals and came across this one, big, hairy, audacious goals. So that's our BHAG for the week. All right. Anything else we need to cover for this week? All right. Take that as a no. And I will stop recording.